The Society of the Cincinnati, Inc., is a patriotic hereditary society with branches in the United States and France, founded in 1783, to preserve the ideals and fellowship of officers of the Continental Army who served in the Revolutionary War. Now in its third century, the society promotes public interest in the American Revolution through its library and museum collections, exhibitions, programs, publications, and other activities. It is the oldest hereditary society in North America. Origins. The concept of the Society of the Cincinnati was that of Major General Henry Knox. The first meeting of the society was held in May 1783 at a dinner at Mount Julian in Fishkill, New York, before the British evacuation from New York City. The meeting was chaired by Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton, and the participants agreed to stay in contact with each other after the war. Membership was generally limited to officers who had served at least 3 years in the Continental Army or Navy. It included officers of the French Army and Navy above certain ranks. Officers in the Continental Line who died during the war were also entitled to be recorded as members. A membership would devolve to their eldest male heir. Members of the considerably larger fighting forces comprising the colonial militias and Minutemen were not entitled to join the society. Later in the 18th century, the society's rules adopted a system of primogeniture wherein membership was passed down to the eldest son after the death of the original member. Present-day hereditary members generally must be descended from an officer who served in the Continental Army or Navy for at least 3 years, from an officer who died or was killed in service, or from an officer serving at the close of the Revolution. Each officer may be represented by only one descendant at any given time, following the rules of primogeniture. The society is named after Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, who left his farm to accept a term as Roman consul and served as Magister Populi. He assumed lawful dictatorial control of Rome to meet a war emergency. When the battle was won, he returned power to the Senate and went back to plowing his fields. The society's motto reflects that ethic of selfless service. Omnia reliquit servere rem publicum. The society has had 3 goals: to preserve the rights so dearly won, to promote the continuing union of the states, and to assist members in need, their widows, and their orphans. Within 12 months of the founding, a constituent society had been organized in each of the 13 states and in France. Of about 5,500 men originally eligible for membership, 2,150 had joined within a year. King Louis XVI ordained the French Society of the Cincinnati, which was organized on July 4, 1784. Up to that time, the King of France had not allowed his officers to wear any foreign decorations, but he made an exception in favor of the badge of the Cincinnati. George Washington was elected the first President-General of the Society. He served from December 1783 until his death in 1799. The second President-General was Alexander Hamilton. Upon Hamilton's death due to his duel with Aaron Burr, the third President-General of the Society was Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. In 1808, he ran unsuccessfully for President of the United States against James Madison. Its members have included notable military and political leaders, including 23 signers of the United States Constitution. Founding members: Connecticut Abraham Baldwin, Joel Barlow, Zebulon Butler, John Chester, David Humphreys, Jedediah Huntington, Jacob Kingsbury, Jonathan Trumbull, Jr., Delaware Daniel Jennifer Adams, Enoch Anderson, Joseph Anderson, Thomas Anderson, William Anderson, Caleb Prue Bennett, James Campbell, John Driscoll, Henry Duff, Reuben Gilder, David Hall, Joseph Hossman, John Vance Hyatt, Peter Jackett, Jr., James Jones, Charles Kidd, David Kirkpatrick, Robert Henry Kirkwood, Henry Latimer, John Lermonth, William McKinnon, Alan McLean, Stephen McWilliam, Nathaniel Mitchell, George Monroe, James Moore, John Patton, John Platt, Charles Pope, George Purvis, Edward Roche, Ebenezer Augustus Smith, James Tilton, Nathaniel Twining, Joseph Vaughan, William Adams, and Joseph Hassler. France. Jean-Baptiste de Traversay, Maxime Julien Emery de Beauvoir, Pierre L'Enfant, Louis-René Levasseur de la Touche-Treville, Paul-François Ignace de Barletier de Mars, Gilbert du Motier, Louis-Marc-Antoine de Noailles, Georges-René Le Pelly de Plevel, Charles Armand Tuffin, Jean-Gaspard Vence, Alexandre Théodore Victor, Jean-Baptiste Donation de Vimmer, Joseph de Cambys, Henry de Saint-Simon, Georgia James Armstrong, Samuel Elbert, George Matthews, John Milton, Francis Tenniel, Maryland Lloyd Beale, Josias Carville Hall, Mordecai Gist, John Gunby, Thomas Lancaster Lansdale, James Lingan, Daniel Morgan, Nathaniel Ramsey, William Smallwood, Tench Tillman, Otho Williams, Richard Pindell, Massachusetts, Stephen Abbott, Jeduthan Baldwin, John Brooks, Henry Birbeck, David Cobb, John Crane, Thomas Henry Cushing, Henry Dearborn, William Eustace, Constant Freeman, John Grayton, Africa Hamlin, William Heath, William Hull, Thomas Hunt, Henry Knox, Henry Jackson, Michael Jackson, Simon Land, Benjamin Lincoln, Samuel Nicholson, William North, Rufus Putnam, William Shepherd, William Stacy, Benjamin Tupper, Alicia Horton, Abraham Williams, New Hampshire, Nicholas Gilman, John Sullivan, Joseph Silly, Henry Dearborn, James Reed, New Jersey, Abraham Appleton, Jeremiah Ballard, William Barton, John Beatty, John Bishop, John Blair, Joseph Bloomfield, Absalom Bonham, James Bonnell, Seth Bowen, Nathaniel Bowman, David Brearley, Joseph Buck, Eden Burrows, John Burrows, Lambert Cadwallader, Samuel Conn, John Conway, Richard Cox, John Noble Cumming, Ephraim Darby, Elias Dayton, Jonathan Dayton, Cyrus DeHart, Nathaniel Donnell, John Doughty, Lewis Ford Dunham, Ebenezer Elmer, Peter Faulkner, Chilean Ford, Marlon Ford, David Foreman, Jonathan Foreman, Luther Halsey, Jacob Paris, James Hurd, John Hurd, William Helms, Samuel Hendry, John Holmes, Jonathan Holmes, Richard Howell, Andrew Hunter, Jacob Pyer, William Kersey, Derek Lane, Richard Lloyd, Francis Luce, Absalom Martin, William Malcolm, Aaron Ogden, Matthias Ogden, Benajah Osman, John Peck, Robert Pemberton, William Sanford Pennington, Jonathan Phillips, Jacob Piatt, William Piatt, Samuel Reading, John Reed, John Bewcastle, Jonathan Rear, John Ross, Cornelius Riker Saddam, Samuel C. Seeley, Israel Shreve, Samuel Moore Shute, William Shute, Jonathan Snowden, Oliver Spencer, Moses Sproul, Abraham Stout, Wessel Ten Broek Stout, Edmund Disney Thomas, William Tuttle, George Walker, Abel Wayman, and Ephraim Lockhart Whitlock. New York: Aaron Burr, George Clinton, James Clinton, John Doughty, Nicholas Fish, Peter Gansevoort, Alexander Hamilton, Rufus King, Joseph Hardy, John Lamb, Morgan Lewis, Henry Beekman Livingston, Alexander McDougall, Charles McKnight, David Oliphant, Philip Schuyler, John Moran Scott, William Stevens Smith, John Stagg Jr., Ebenezer Stevens, Silas Talbot, Benjamin Talmadge, Philip Van Cortlandt, Richard Varick, William Scudder, Dr. Caleb Sweet, Marge, Jen. Baron von Steuben, L.T. Cole, Bernardus Swarthout, Cornelius Swarthout, B.G. Philip Van Cortlandt, Frederick von Weisenfels, North Carolina, William Lee Alexander, James Armstrong, John Armstrong, Thomas Armstrong, John Baptist Ashe, Samuel Ashe, Jr., Peter Backett, Benjamin Bailey, Cada Ballard, Robert Bell, Jacob Blunt, Reading Blunt, Adam Boyd, Joseph Blythe, G. Bradley, Alexander Brevard, Joseph Brevard, William Bush, Thomas Calendar, John Campbell, James Campen, Benjamin Carter, Thomas Clark, John Clendenin, Benjamin Coleman, John Craddock, Anthony Crutcher, John Davis, Samuel Denny, Charles Dixon, Tillman Dixon, Wynne Dixon, George Doherty, Thomas Donahoe, Thomas Evans, Richard Fenner, Robert Fenner, William Ferraby, Thomas Finney, John Ford, James Fergus, Charles Gerard, Francis Graves, James West Green, Joshua Hadley, Clement Hall, Selby Harney, Robert Hayes, John Hill, Thomas Hogg, Hardy Holmes, Robert Howe, John Ingalls, Curtis Ivy, Abner Lamb, Nathaniel Lawrence, Nehemiah Long, Archibald Lytle, William Lytle, William McLean, William McClure, James McDougall, John McNeice, Griffith, John McCree, Joseph Montfort, James Moore, Henry Murphy, John Nelson, Thomas Pasture, William Polk, Robert Rayford, Jesse Reed, John Reed, Joseph Thomas Rhodes, William Sanders, Anthony Sharp, Daniel Shaw, Stephen Slade, John Slaughter, Jesse Steed, John Summers, Jethro Sumner, James Tate, Howell Tatum, James Thaxton, Nathaniel Williams, William Williams, and Edward Yarborough. Pennsylvania: John Armstrong, Jr., Joshua Barney, John Barry, William Bingham, Thomas Buda, Daniel Brodhead, David Brooks, Edward Butler, Richard Butler, Thomas Butler, William Butler, Thomas Craig, Richard Dale, Edward Hand, Josiah Harmouth, Thomas Hartley, Richard Humpton, William Irvin, Francis Johnston, John Paul Jones, Robert Magor, Thomas Mifflin, John Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, Alexander Murray, Louis Nicola, Samuel Nicholas, Zebulon Pike, Thomas Proctor, Arthur Street, Clare, William Thompson, Anthony Wayne, Baron von Steuben, Rhode Island, William Barton, Archibald Crary, Nathaniel Green, Moses Hazen, Daniel Jackson, William Jones, David Lyman, Coggeshall Olney, Jeremiah Olney, Stephen Olney, William Tew, Simeon Thayer, James Mitchell Varnum, Abraham Whipple, Sweden, Count Axel von Fersen, Baron Kurt von Stedink, Virginia, George Baylor, Francis T. Brooke, Abraham Buford, Nicholas Cabell, William Overton Callis, Edward Carrington, Louis de Corney, John Cropper, William Davies, Christian Febiger, Horatio Gates, John Gibson, William Grayson, John Green, Charles Harrison, William Heth, Peter Higgins, Samuel Hopkins, Henry Lee III, John Crittenden, Sr., Charles Lewis, George Matthews, James Monroe, Daniel Morgan, John Muhlenberg, John Neville, Thomas Overton, Thomas Posey, Major John Pryor, William Russell, Richard Taylor, John Ward, John Watts, George Washington, George Augustin Washington, George Whedon, David Williams, Willis Wilson, James Wood, Brigadier General William Russell. Insignia. On June 19, 1783, the General Society of the Cincinnati adopted the bald eagle as its insignia. It is one of America's first post-revolution symbols and an important piece of American iconography. It is the second official American emblem to use the bald eagle, following the Great Seal of the United States. The insignia may have been derived from the same discourse that produced the seal. The suggestion of the bald eagle as the Cincinnati insignia was made by Major Pierre L'Enfant, a French officer who joined the American Army in 1777, served in the Corps of Engineers, and became one of the first members of the society. He observed that he bald eagle, which is unique to this continent, and is distinguished from those of other climates by its white head and tail, appears to me to deserve attention. In 1783, L'Enfant was commissioned to travel to France to have the first eagle badges made, based on his design. The medallions at the center of the Cincinnati American eagle depict, on the obverse, Cincinnatus receiving his sword from Roman senators, and, on the reverse, Cincinnatus at his plow being crowned by the figure of Feme. The Society's colors, light blue and white, symbolize the fraternal bond between the United States and France. A specially commissioned eagle, worn by President General George Washington, was presented to Lafayette, Indiana 1824 during his grand tour of the United States. This badge remained in possession of the Lafayette family until sold at auction on December 11, 2007, for $5.3 million United States dollars by Lafayette's great-great-granddaughter, together with what are believed to be the original ribbon and red leather box. The badge was purchased by the Jose Acuti and René de Chambrun Foundation for display in Lafayette's bedroom at Chateau La Grange, his former home, 30 miles east of Paris. It may also be displayed at Mount Vernon, Washington's former home in Virginia. This was one of 3 eagles known to have been owned by Washington, who most often wore the Diamond Eagle, a diamond-encrusted badge given him by the French matelots. That Diamond Eagle continues to be passed down to each President General of the Society of the Cincinnati as part of his induction into office. The Cincinnati Eagle is displayed in various places of public importance, including Fountain Square, Cincinnati, Ohio, alongside the American and municipal flags. The flag of the Society displays blue and white stripes and a dark blue canton in the upper corner next to the hoist. Refer to the section below on the Later Society for the city's historical connection to the Cincinnati. On ceremonial occasions, members may wear their badges on their American military uniforms. Criticism. When news of the foundation of the Society spread, Judge Dennis Burke published several pamphlets under the pseudonym Cassius where he criticized the Society as an attempt at re-establishing an hereditary nobility in the new republic. The pamphlets, entitled An Address to the Freemen of South Carolina and Considerations on the Society or Order of Cincinnati, sparked a general debate that included prominent names, including Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. The criticism voiced concern about the apparent creation of an hereditary elite. Membership eligibility is inherited through primogeniture, and generally excluded enlisted men and militia officers, unless they were placed under state line or continental line forces for a substantial time period, and their descendants. Benjamin Franklin was among the Society's earliest critics. He was concerned about the creation of a quasi-noble order, and of the Society's use of the eagle in its emblem, as evoking the traditions of heraldry and the English aristocracy. In a letter to his daughter Sarah Batch written on January 26, 1784, Franklin commented on the ramifications of the Cincinnati. "I only wonder that, when the united wisdom of our nation had, in the Articles of Confederation, manifested their dislike of establishing ranks of nobility, by authority either of the Congress or of any particular state, a number of private persons should think proper to distinguish themselves and the posterity from their fellow citizens, and form an order of hereditary knights, in direct opposition to the solemnly declared sense of their country." The influence of the Cincinnati members, former officers, was another concern. When delegates to the Constitutional Convention were debating the method of choosing a president, James Madison reported the following speech of Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts: "A popular election in this case is radically vicious. The ignorance of the people would put it in the power of some one set of men dispersed through the Union and acting in concert to delude them into any appointment." He observed that such a society of men existed in the order of the Cincinnati. They are respectable, united, and influential. They will in fact elect the chief magistrate in every instance, if the election be referred to the people. Gerry's respect for the characters composing this society could not blind him to the danger and impropriety of throwing such a power into their hands. The debate spread to France on account of the eligibility of French veterans from the Revolutionary War. In 1785, Honoré Gabriel Riqueta, Comte de Mirabeau, was approached by Franklin, who was at the time stationed in Paris, and suggested to him to write something about the society directed at the French public. Mirabeau was provided with Burke's pamphlets and Franklin's letter to his daughter, and from this, with the help of Nicholas Champfort, created his own enlarged version entitled Considerations sur l'ordre du Cincinnatus, which was published in London November that year. An English translation carried out by Samuel Romilly followed, of which an American edition was published in 1786. Following this public debate and criticism, George Washington, who had been unaware of the particulars of the charter when he agreed to become president of the society, began to have doubts about the benefit of the society. He had in fact considered abolishing the society on its very first general meeting, the 4th of May 1784. However, in the meantime Major L'Enfant had arrived bringing his designs of the diplomas and medals, as well as news of the success of the society in France, which made an abolishment of the society impossible. Washington instead at the meeting launched an ultimatum, that if the clauses about heredity were not abandoned, he would resign from his post as president of the society. This was accepted, and furthermore informal agreement was made not to wear the eagles in public, so as not to resemble European chivalrous orders. A new charter, the so-called Institution, was printed, which omitted among others the disputed clauses about heredity. However, when the public furore about the society had died down, the new institution was rescinded, and the original reintroduced, including the clauses about heredity. The French chapter, who had obtained official permission to form from the King Louis XVI of France, also abolished heredity, but never reintroduced it, and thus the last members were approved 3 February 1792, shortly before the French monarchy was disbanded.